Hi, everybody. This is Jonah Goldberg. This is Dispatch Live. I've been asked to be the MC on this in part because we might not sure exactly how we're going to work it out, make this into a remnant down the road as well, or at least part of it. But that's not anybody's concern right now. This is the first time we've done this, I think, as a Dispatch Live. I can't remember, but
I think so. Yeah,
we kind of fell over backwards into doing this annual State of the Dispatch thing, and for whatever reason, we do it in October. I guess because we were founded in October, and so here we are. We couldn't do it on the 5-year anniversary, and unfortunately, that means I have to do it with you, Steve. And
my apologies.
Yeah,
I went back and listened to some of these old ones to prepare for tonight.
No, you didn't.
You might not know what preparation is, but like actually went back and listened to these things. And you open with a version of that joke every time. Like,
seriously?
And I got to be here with Steve.
It's funny because it's true.
It's not every time. And actually, I only listened into 2. So.
All right. Well, anyway. So how do you want to start this thing? We really haven't done.
Are you drinking anything or no?
Yeah, I got scotch here.
Okay. I do not have Spanish red wine. I have Von Stiel cherry cider from Door County, Wisconsin.
I have
which Jonah can now attest is really a great place. So to anybody out there, and to you, Jonah, on 5 years.
Yeah.
Cheers, I say.
Yeah. It's an enormous pour because I knew I wasn't going to be able to go up and get second. And because
Jonah
I like
has
scotch.
a Yeti full of scotch.
Scotch down into my belly. All right, so do you want to? I mean, typically we kind of start with the punditry and then move to the dispatch, but we got people out there listening, so why don't we just sort of start with the dispatch stuff, and I think the punditry stuff will emerge organically from that. Certainly some of the questions.
You're the host. I follow you.
So you're the CEO, right? How's it going? How's the dispatch doing?
Dispatch is going well. People who have listened to these before will this will be familiar to them. It's going well. We're growing at a time when you have media companies that are shutting down and cutting back. We're growing and adding, and that's a positive. We had been, I think we said, approaching 40,000 paying members for a while, for longer than we thought. The growth slowed a little bit there. We have now surpassed that very important milestone and are heading, I think, pretty quickly to 50,000. So we're on our way. Excited about that, and excited about looking at other new ways of growing. I mean, I think we'll get into some details and share more about both the path to growth and the people who are helping us get there. But I think as we look forward, sort of past the election and into 2025, sort of growing what we do, growing how many people we reach, is kind of top of mind institutionally for the dispatch, and that's a good place to be.
So how many? I mean, I should know this off the top of my head, but how many people work for the dispatch now?
We have 27 full-time employees and a number of regular contributors who we think of as a part of the core dispatch family. So
like Lincecum's not an employee, but he is part of the roster, the family.
Right. And Will and other writers like that.
And we should talk about how we at least briefly mentioned, because it's one of those internally well-known things, but not publicly facing, is that we brought on Mike Rothman full-time as the president, but also just sort of the get stuff done guy. Why don't we just explain who he is and what that role is?
Yeah, we're gonna provide a lot more detail on that in the coming sort of days and weeks. But we've really beefed up the business side, and we're just paying more attention to it. I mean, you've again, people who have heard us do this before know that we were well aware from the beginning of this thing that we did not have the kind of big business acumen to make this succeed. We're both journalists going back 25 years when we launched the thing. So we wanted to bring in some people who are smart about how to build it. And we have done that, and we're in the process of adding to that team. We'll be making sort of more formal and detailed announcements in the coming days. But yeah, we've got really, really smart people, good people helping to build and grow, including Mike, who you mentioned.
And how many people are on the free list? So this is one of these things that one I know the answer to, but I think I'm supposed to get these things out there. People don't really understand this distinction, right? It's like we have hundreds of thousands of subscribers depending on what you talk about the product, but we have the difference between paid and free, and why does the free list matter?
Yeah, so the free list is now well over 500,000 people. And the people who are on that list get, sort of shortened, truncated versions of some of the products, certainly not all the products that the paying members get. Paying members get everything, get access to these. There are no free subscribers who are watching this now because they're not members.
And they're disappointments to us.
We love them. We love them on the free list.
You can be disappointed in your children, right? You can be disappointed in loved ones. We
want them to step up. We want them to take advantage of all the things that membership brings. Membership has its privileges, as another company once said. So we'd like them to join. But it's a great group, and they're getting. They're not getting all of what we do, but they're at least seeing some of it. And look, we're well aware. The economy seems to be doing pretty well now, but that hasn't been the case the entire time we've been doing this. And people were cutting back, and things did get quite expensive. And we understand it's not necessarily easy for people to fork over $100 or $10 a month to join. So we're incredibly grateful for the people who have done that, and hopeful that the people who haven't will consider doing that as they see more of our products and understand that there's a lot of good stuff they're not getting.
So the question I get the most, and it's one of the ones that came in from the site earlier, is this is from Eric. With 5 years of experience behind you, what would you do differently if you were starting out today, accepting the answer of including a corner-like blog section from the start?
comes up every time.
This is a great idea. It's really the answer to so many of our problems. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, it's I should be aware, because we do get this question. I think,
it's a little bit like being asked, what would you do differently than Joe Biden, right? You should have an answer ready.
Yeah, right. I should have it. Nothing at all. I think it's been great.
Nothing comes to mind.
Jonah's going to have that in ads next week. I think probably there were a couple points. We grew really tremendously during the pandemic. I think people wanted good information, wanted information they could trust, and they came to us. We grew a lot then. I'd say we had a moment where sort of the growth engine, we relied a lot on organic growth, which basically just means word of mouth, people seeing our stuff on social media and signing up. And we were probably a little bit late in coming up with a more sophisticated growth strategy. And it was much more a sort of, if we build it, they will come kind of model. And that really worked for a long time, thankfully. But I'd say, getting smart and serious about that would allow us to reach more people. We're thrilled, just again, to level set for people. We're far ahead of where we imagined we would be in 5 years. And, I don't know that we did projections out to 5 years. I think maybe we did. I think we did. Our long-term projection was 5 years, but we didn't envision this. We're reaching many more people, and we have many more members than we imagined that we would have at this point. So with that as sort of the baseline, having seen and heard from members what the impact of some of our work is on the people who are here with us, we'd like to reach more people. We think there's a lot more good work that we can be doing. We think we could be doing more of it with a bigger staff. We know that there are some subject areas that we've heard from our members they would like us to explore, either in newsletter format or with sort of areas of responsibility and journalists assigned to cover those things. And we're looking to do that. So coming up with ways earlier to have kind of accelerated that growth to enable us to do those things earlier would have been great. And that's, I mean, I'm the CEO, that's on me. We tried, we got smart about it. We talked to a lot of people. And, I think we had some success, but doing that on a consistent basis with sort of smart, tried and true tactics would have been better. And some of this, last point on this, some of this is such a new world. I mean, what we were doing really was different. We were trying to kind of live in the space between, what media industry types are calling the creator economy and then the more sort of legacy establishment media companies. And we thought we could do both, and provide for, writers, reporters who had worked in legacy media establishments the kind of freedom that they might want if they set out and created their own Substack, for instance, and provide the security of a media company for the kind of people who are tempted by the freedom that being a creator would give them. And I think we did that, but coming up earlier with some of these growth strategies that we're really going to jump in on now, I think just would have accelerated our growth. Again, we're happy with our growth, but could have been more, could have been faster.
It's funny because I interpreted the question the same way you interpreted the question, but the actual question was if we were starting today, what we do differently. And a lot of the same things apply, but it's kind of a different mental exercise when you think about it, right? Because one of the problems we had when we started with Substack. We were very successful on Substack, but we basically had the vision originally of being kind of like a mini Substack,
right?
Where we would do revenue share with people, but we would provide, actual health insurance and we would provide promotion or whatever. You could work out different deals and do a kind of a revenue share thing. There weren't the tools available on Substack 5 years ago to do that. They, for the dispatch. And, so there were, sometimes I'll say to people that there were people we should have pressed harder to hire back then.
Yeah.
Blew some more money than we were willing to. And it turned out we were very frugal with our money in the beginning. And it would have made sense to buy some people, even if we couldn't have done the rev share thing then. And now, because Substack's a thing, right? It's still, it's big, but it's kind of it's had growing pains. It had, I don't want to disparage anybody, but it's I'm not exactly sure how it's doing now, but the successful people on Substack are not bribable away because Substack is basically doing what we wanted to do. And so in a weird way, the sweet spot was probably, to start 2.5 years ago, but you can't, you can play those games all day long about when was this because the environment now is substantially different than it was 5 years ago in all sorts of ways. And I don't know that we would have, if we were starting today, would we start on Substack? Probably not.
No, I don't think so, because Substack is such a mature thing. And, the sort of tech stack that we ended up on, we've had a couple different iterations of it, I think works quite well for us now to send the newsletters. I mean, when we were, just give people a sense, when we launched on Substack, it really was a newsletter platform, and they agreed to sort of build us out and create this website that was sort of it was like a custom website, but they were not in the website business. I mean, they were doing that to accommodate us because they wanted to see how to grow media companies on their platform. And, so a lot of those early years was taking kind of ill-fitting pieces and trying to glue them together in a way that, we were just mostly concerned with getting information to people. We just wanted to be able to publish our stuff and do the work that we wanted to do and get it to people. Substack made that very easy to do, but I don't think we would need to do that today.
All right. So another question, and basically, why I am interested in this question. I mean, second only to my desire for a group blog is my investment in this issue. Jeff Tatusko, I hope I'm reading that right. It's very small print. I'd really just like an app to pull up regularly rather than just the site. Where are we on the app issue?
Yeah, that's a good question because so to give the very brief history of this, Jonah in one of the first meetings with Substack talked about the need for us to have an app. And the Substack founders who, were seeing the future of journalism before people in so many different ways did not see that. They
No,
sort of
they
laughed
acted
at it.
like I proposed. We really need to turn this church into a stable, right? They
Right,
were just
exactly.
offended by the suggestion.
Right. And then, 3 years later, they launched an app. So we've looked at the possibility of adding an app. I still think it makes sense. I would say we're not close to adding one right now, but it's something that as we consider how best to grow, we should think about it. I think basically, again, we want to provide high quality information to people who are willing to pay us for it because they think the information is very good. How we do that, I think we should be very flexible. And if we have enough people who want an app because it will help them organize how they get our information that they're paying us to get, I think we should be at least open to it.
Yeah, you've heard me say there's basically nothing that you haven't heard me say before. I haven't heard you say before, but
we're at that point. Yeah, we are at that point.
When I first started with National Review Online, back when the internet was there were still people predicting it was a flash in the pan, and I remember being really impressed by some of the suits at NR by saying, well, they were quoting Bill Buckley, and they said, remember, the mission of National Review is the mission. And what they meant by, or what Bill meant by that, was that the magazine is a means to an end, right? And you shouldn't get so married to a communications medium that you lose sight of what you're actually trying to do, right? And so, like, I've always had this position, like, push content, newsletters, that kind of thing. As long as it's working for us, that's great. But I'm not married to it. Like, in my lifetime, I've gone from doing a blog to doing a newsletter to back to a blog to this to that. Like, it takes different forms. If we get to a point where it just makes sense to have a stationary app on people's devices, then we have an app. I mean, that's fine by me. I mean, people are still reading it. Whether it comes to them in their email box or something else is very secondary to me. It needs to make sense as user experience and as a business proposition. And if those two things are satisfied and that doesn't impinge on the journalism in any way, then we just go with the best choice, right? I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, Declan Garvey, who's our executive editor, probably known to most people watching this now, and one of those people who really does, a lot of the work that we don't do, texted to point out that the web redesign that we just did laid the foundation for a future app. That was part of the thinking going into that design, was that it would be that it would facilitate the development of an app. So at least it's something that we are likely to consider in the future as we continue to build out.
All right, so we're getting a bunch of questions about, like, Trumpism and editorial approach and politics and all that. I'm going to get to that, but I'm just trying to do the due diligence on, like, purely nuts and bolts dispatch stuff first. John Poitier, I again apologize for pronunciations. He asked, do you have any difficulty maintaining quality control of your content with the variety of staff, expertise, and viewpoints? And
I think the short answer to that is no. We don't.
I was sure you were going to make a G-file joke in there, but anyway, go on. I'm just waiting for it.
No, in fact, I would say, again, this is like the thing that we try to do in these things. This is part of why we do these things, is to maybe overshare and be a little bit more candid than we ought to be. I would say at the beginning, we certainly had designs on getting some of the best writers and the best thinkers and the think tank people who could write and tell stories. to help us provide the best reporting and commentary on politics, policy, and culture that we could find. We never wanted to be in a position, we said this out loud, we talked about it with the staff, where we were just publishing things to fill space, or we were sending newsletters because it was this particular day and there needed to be a newsletter sent. We didn't want to have to do that, even though we know that sending things at certain times and schedules helps create habits, and readers, members come to count on it. But I will say, in those early years, we were probably more permissive in the kinds of contributions that we took than we are now. We're maybe a little bit more exacting and a little bit more demanding, and a little bit less afraid to take, a really good idea from an outside contributor that maybe doesn't fit or needs some additional thinking or requires some additional sort of policy work or a few additional phone calls. We're perfectly happy to say, we kind of like the idea, but go make it better than we were at the very outset. So I think the quality has improved from my perspective. The one area where I will say, again, in the interest of candor, we could do better sometimes is, and this was in the original manifesto that we posted on our first day, on our launch day. We talked a lot about being charitable to people we don't agree with and engaging with the best arguments of people who disagree with us on various policy positions. And I think by and large, we do that. And we did say, even at the time, when somebody is acting like an idiot, we need to be blunt about it. And we're not afraid to call people out. Having said that, sometimes, are we a little bit too easy with the kind of elbow to the chin in a piece than we should be? Maybe. I would say that would be one thing. Sometimes I look at it and I think, we don't really need to do that. We don't need to say it that way. But by and large, I think this is probably maybe the most important point about where we are 5 years in. And I'm sure everybody feels this way about the people they work with. The staff at the Dispatch is so exceptional. We really have some incredible people, writers, editors, podcasters, producers, the whole thing. They make it easier for Jonah and I to have to be able to do less. Jonah, the point when we launched was that Jonah was always going to be sort of protected to do Jonah things, and didn't need to be involved in staff management things or editing people's pieces or this. We just wanted Jonah to do Jonah stuff, and so I took a little bit more of that management side stuff from the beginning. But we have such good people from the editorial leadership on down now, building out the business side, that you really do feel comfortable just saying, like, keep it good, keep making it good.
No, it's funny. So, like, one of the things, again, I've talked about a lot, we've talked about a lot, was that one of the reasons why I was willing to set fire to my ships and leave NR was that a lot of my heroes were institution builders, and that it's part of this thing about modeling the behavior that I think is missing in journalism and on the right and all that kind of stuff. But part of it was just wanting to build an institution that molded people in a certain way. And I don't want to sound paternalistic and condescending or any of that kind of stuff, in part because I've had such little role in it in day-to-day stuff. But like, we've been wildly successful by my lights in terms of creating a culture of professionalism and decency and just basic good eggs, that and I'm not saying that we haven't had missteps, and there are always personnel issues and management is hard and all that kind of thing. But like, even if we end up flopping in 5 years or something like that, there's going to be this whole generation of people, sort of like the people who were trained at the Washington Monthly under Charlie Peters and that kind of thing. There's going to be just this generation of really, really talented people who are going to be able to brag for the rest of their lives that they were working at the Dispatch during this period. And I'm kind of sappy proud of that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that noob, David French. The guy was nothing when he came to us.
That's right.
And, now he's modestly successful in some other publication.
I want to get back to viewers' questions in a second, but here's one I'm kind of curious what your answer is. Legit, sincerely, this isn't staged or anything. This isn't like we're telling the George Foreman grill and what do you think of this burger, right? I actually kind of curious what your answer is now. I know what your answer was 3 years ago, but one of the great internal contradictions of the Dispatch, I'll just say it plainly, is that part of our whole mission was to write for people outside the Beltway in a way that didn't insult their intelligence, didn't waste their time. This was for smart people who didn't want to live and breathe politics.
Yeah.
Right. And we said that in pitches. It's part of the whole mantra, right? And it's like, and it redounds in ways that people don't really necessarily appreciate in terms of like how we explain things, the writing style of things, the kind of stories that we cover, the kind of stories that we don't cover, right? That's part of the philosophy of the whole thing. The contradiction comes with the fact that we have a really intense following inside the Beltway.
Yeah.
Right. There are people who are, and not just, when I say intense following inside the Beltway, I don't necessarily mean people who live in the zip codes inside the Beltway, although we have a lot of that. I mean, people, professional political journalists, political consultants who may live in, La Jolla, but like they're intense. We have a very specialized group of readers that we get a lot of feedback from who are not our intended audience. But because we have pros who are good at this stuff and we're in all that kind of stuff, it's this weird mismatch. Like our intended audience were these was the cardiologist from Phoenix who cares about politics but doesn't have time to spend all day doom scrolling on about politics. And it turns out that like among our most dedicated people are like news anchors and political consultants.
Yes.
How do you balance that?
Yeah. So I don't. So, I mean, you've heard me, and I think our members have heard me. If they've heard us do this before, talk about this stuff before, I'm perfectly willing to admit that much of the success that we had came because we stumbled into the success. So we had a really good mission and we didn't know what we were doing. And wow, oh my gosh, I can't believe we had success in the following areas. I don't think that that's what happened here. My view all along was write for people outside the Beltway, but keep it smart. Don't condescend. We're not dumbing it down for people. People are busy. They won't necessarily know what CISA means if we just put CISA as a government agency in a piece. Spell it out, tell them what it is. My supposition from the beginning was that we would always have the people inside the Beltway. They would read us anyway. They weren't going to be deterred by the fact that we wrote in a conversational way, that we didn't do sort of, the old school journalism school inverted pyramid style, that we talked to people as if you were writing a letter to an email to a friend. I mean, pretty informal, but packed with information that leaned into explanation. And, we got early affirmation. I told you this when it happened. I don't think I've maybe mentioned it here before, but, one of the sort of early ways that we knew that we were getting that group that you're talking about was a conversation that I had with my longtime friend, Chuck Dodd, who was at the time moderator of Meet the Press. Still, I think I don't know what his title is, senior Washington guru at NBC News, colleague of mine at NBC. We were talking about the Morning Dispatch. This is probably 3-4 years ago. And Chuck said, that's the thing I read for either first or one of the first things I read every morning. And he said, this is Chuck Todd, who's been in Washington, D.C. at this point for, 30 years, knows everybody who's in D.C., knows every acronym. He's the ultimate D.C. insider. He knows everything. And I don't remember what the government agency was, but said, what I really appreciate that you guys do is when you write something and you're writing about some, government agency in Washington, D.C., you usually don't just use the acronym. You tell us what it is, and then you give like a little clause explaining the function of the agency. And he said, I find that so helpful. And my thought at the time when he said this to me, and this is like, just informal conversation over beers, was if Chuck Todd finds that useful, there's really not anybody who doesn't find that useful. So I'm not, to answer your question directly, I'm not surprised that we have that following. So much of what's wrong with journalism, and we could go on for hours about what's wrong with journalism today, but one of the things in particular about political journalism and political journalism that originates in Washington, D.C., is you have so many political journalists who write for other political journalists. They're not writing for news consumers outside the Beltway. And it reads like they're writing for political journalists, like they just want to impress people with their knowledge of 80 acronyms and their insider jargon. That's not our audience. And I find most of those people really annoying, to be honest.
So my favorite part about your answer is that you said, we're not just going to spell out CISA. We're going to tell people what it is. And you didn't tell people what it is.
Yeah. Well, you want to know why?
Because you couldn't remember.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
Yes.
I looked it up while you were talking.
See?
Yeah.
We do this on a collaborative basis.
All right. All right. So we're going to get to all the Trump and Republican Party stuff and all that.
Can I, let me just jump in real quick and ask you a question. What would your answer be to the insider out thing? Because you sound, the way that you phrased that question to me makes it sound like you are a little surprised by that. I feel like that was, I have these things that our staff they just can finish my sentences because I say this stuff so often. My impression was that was one of them.
Yeah.
But it sounds like from the way that you asked the question that you didn't think that was one of them.
No, I mean, and it gets to a large, like as we said at the beginning, we kind of plateaued around approaching 40,000 for a very long time. Right. And paid subscribers. And I think you're going to have 100 different explanations for why that is. Some of them are on us. Some of them aren't on us, whatever. But I think one of them is that we were sort of neither fish nor fowl. And so for a lot of our audience was this weird hybrid that is harder to market to, right? Because we're very full of ourselves in terms of, I'm being self-deprecating about this, but we've foregone making a lot of money at quite a few crossroads by choosing to do things that we think is the right thing to do. And I think there are some people who look at it and see it as precious and pompous and this is a business and we should run it like a business, and there's nothing wrong with a little bombast in journalism, right, and all that kind of stuff, and we've eschewed a lot of that kind of thing. And I think you can make an argument from a business point of view that we made the wrong decision about some of this stuff, right? And my response to a lot of people is, I don't care. But at the same time, I really want this thing to be successful. And this fact that we kind of have a foot in these two different worlds in terms of our audience. I mean, we have foot in a lot of different worlds in terms of our audience, but one of them is this sort of insider versus outsider thing.
Yeah.
And I think the tone, I think there are people in our audience who are in one side of the Venn diagram or the other, don't really realize that we're not talking directly to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you could come up with a business strategy aimed at one that was more aggressively aimed at just one group than what we've chosen. And I think the reason why we've chosen it is because we just want to do the smartest stuff we can. And that means it's going to be appealing to insiders, but it's also going to be appealing to outsiders. I'm not sure I'm explaining this right, but there's a schizophrenia to it, and I don't mean it to disparage people with neurodivergent, blah, 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 blah. My point is just that there's this what did Yogi Berra say? When I came to a fork in a road, I took it.
Yeah, took it.
There's a kind of that essence to the thing, and when you try to explain what we're doing to people, when you try to explain to people what we're doing, um, sometimes it's when you explain it, you can kind of turn people off because they want something different. And I think when people get what we're doing, there's this thing that clicks in them and they become sort of passionate about it. But it's anyway, it's just this weird thing I think about from time to time when I read like Dispatch Politics, and then I read, I don't know, the G File or Capitalism, right? I mean, like there's this, it's no one else is doing what we're doing, and I don't.
And there might be a reason why. Is that what
there might be a reason why. So, which brings me to another question from somebody, and then we were going to turn to the politics stuff. But we get asked this stuff all the time. We get asked about the Bulwark. This reader, Ted B, asks, "How does the Dispatch compare to the Free Press? The FP seems to have a much broader penetration and reach." What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the stuff that the Free Press publishes is really terrific. I mean, there are days that I wake up and I see something come over from the Free Press, and I think, shoot, I would have loved to have had that piece. And that's a sign of somebody who's doing something right. We have a very different mission, I think. I mean, I think their kind of signature pieces are the sort of aggressively anti-woke stuff. They sort of own that beat, they cover it. And while we do some of that, I wouldn't say that is primarily why we exist. We lean more heavily, I think, in explanatory journalism, and sort of reporting meant to deepen understanding, context, and understanding. And theirs is more, they do some more investigative stuff, and we do some investigative stuff. But I think those are sort of the main differences.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with that. I love Barry. I think a lot of people over there are great. I really hope that, like, at some point, Barry Weiss runs over Douglas Murray's dog, and he's like, "I'm done with you people," and comes over and writes for us. That would be great. But I see, look, this sort of relates to the question I was getting at before about audiences. I have a much better grasp of the intended audience of Free Press or the Bulwark than I do of us, right? I mean, like, and this kind of gets to some of the politics stuff, insofar as, like, there's a very sort of doesn't like wokeness, right? Sort of like a hedge fund manager in New York who's really fed up with how woke their kid's private school is, who's like really in the sweet spot in a certain way with the Free Press audience, and they're killing it. They're doing a great job, but they're much more of a really robust op-ed page in the way the Wall Street Journal is an op-ed page, where occasionally they have reporting too, but they're sort of reported op-eds kind of thing, and I think it's great. I mean, it works, and they've been very successful. But I don't see it as our remit, right? And as far as the Bulwark, I mean, I think we now know very clearly the Bulwark has done great work in all sorts of ways, but foremost for this conversation, in promoting brand differentiation with the Dispatch, because it used to be that people would confuse us all of the time, and I don't think people do that anymore. And I wish them luck, but they're just a very different creature than we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Bulwark, I mean, we've had conversations about this, including with some of our friends at the Bulwark. I still have friends there. I have former colleagues there for the Weekly Standard. They have
done the Dispatch, right? I mean,
yeah, they have some. They've done some additional reporting, which I think is good. I mean, I'm in favor of good reporting sort of anywhere it appears, but they are a political entity, right? I mean, they have Sarah Longwell, who's their CEO, runs a super PAC. They're spending millions and millions of dollars as active participants in the political conversations. Many of them are sort of political activists in a way that we're just not. I mean, we set out, if you look at what we said in that original manifesto, which was our first post on our first day, we talked about wanting to push back against partisan journalism and sort of leading away from polarization. I mean, I think the Bulwark has made no bones. They exist, at least in part, maybe large part, to defeat Donald Trump. They are actively campaigning on behalf of Kamala Harris because they think that's what's best for the country. That's just a very different approach from what we're doing. It may be that in 30 years, I'll look back and say, boy, I think the right approach for us would have been to do more of what the Bulwark did. We should have been more activists than journalists. But I see us as primarily a media outlet that exists in part to provide a place away from partisan, polarized journalism that's on a team, that's on a team that's Democrat or Republican, that's left or I mean that's red or blue.
All right, so I have many views on this, but it feels like this is a natural segue to get to the sort of political environment stuff, which is sort of punditry adjacent. But there's one last question that keeps coming in that I should get to, and then we'll switch to the sort of political environment and why we're so ebullient and upbeat about America today, which is just simply, are we ever going to move to a sort of premium tier or some sort of tier that allows us to do ad-free podcasts and that kind of thing? I know we talked about it a lot, but I don't know where we are on all that.
Yeah, so the answer there is yes. We will be moving to sort of tiered memberships. This has been something I think that I've mentioned probably at least the last 2 years as we've tried to work out exactly what we want to do and what this will look like. And again, with new people who are a lot smarter than I am about the business side, I think we're getting to the point where we'll have some of that. And some of this will involve providing things that lots of our members have been asking for a long time. I mean, sometimes we're slow on this. Sometimes we're pretty responsive and pretty quick. People will hear from our members and they'll have a suggestion and we'll make a change within a week. Other times we'll hear something from our members for a long time and maybe we aren't as responsive as quickly as we can be, but that doesn't mean that we don't hear. So keep the suggestions coming. We want that. We said we wanted to build a community. We were serious about wanting to build a community, and we want this to be a two-way conversation. So we've been working on exactly what a premium membership will look like. And the first thing to be said about it is people who are current Dispatch members who choose not to become a premium member, we haven't decided what this will be called, should understand that they're not going to be losing anything. They're not going to be losing any benefits. And 5 years on, obviously, we have not raised our prices at all, which is not something you could say about ground beef or Starbucks, to use the cliche example. A lot of journalism, a lot of media outlets have raised their prices. We have not raised our prices.
Or Trump NFTs. But anyway, go on.
Or Trump NFTs. We haven't raised our prices, and we're not going to change the prices on the Dispatch membership, and the membership privileges that you have now are membership privileges that will continue. That said, we are going to launch probably within the next 4 weeks, month from now, a premium tier that will be probably $30 a month, $300 a year. It will, among the things that it will feature are the long requested, much requested ad-free podcasts. I can hear champagne corks going off across the country from some of the people who have asked for this again and again and again. Yes, you are going to get ad-free podcasts if you are a premium member. beyond that sort of ad-free viewing experience, if we decide to introduce some of the tasteful sponsorships that we've talked about since our launch days. Again, we made a commitment from the beginning that we're not going to do the auto plays. We're not going to do the obnoxious stuff. We're not going to sort of cheapen ourselves to get a couple of quick ad bucks, but we have talked from the beginning about doing sort of tasteful sponsorships, some kind of partnerships. You've seen this, you've heard this if you've listened to our podcast. Some of our free listeners have seen some of this, so they'll be the premium tier will not be seeing any of that. They'll have sort of earlier access to member events, to new editorial products. We'd like to provide a forum for premium members to be able to submit questions ahead of interviews, either on Dispatch Lives or
Conference
Newsmaker
call
interviews
type things.
on the podcast. Yeah, exactly. So we're rounding out exactly what that means. We are going to offer, we've had a number of our members ask for this as well. The lifetime membership that we offered at the beginning, which we actually offered before we offered any kind of paying membership, has lingered in the background for the last 5 years. We haven't pushed it on anybody. We haven't really made it a thing. We haven't made it part of our sales pitch, but it's still available, and it too will have sort of additional member benefits if you decide to become a lifetime member. That's $1,500. We've had people really just in the past couple weeks say, boy, I wish I had signed up as a lifetime member, but I wasn't sure the Dispatch was going to exist for very long. It now looks like we're going to be around for a while, knock on wood. So anybody who had that moment of hesitation earlier, you can consider that offer renewed. So anyway, I won't go in greater detail, but pay attention. That stuff is all coming. I think within the next 4 or 5 weeks, we'll be able to lay that out in some detail for you, and we're excited about it. We think it's great. This, again, all context for this all goes into this a strategy for growth. We want to reach more people. We want to
do more things.
Yeah, add more staff. We want to cover more things, reach more people, what have you.
So, I mean, I think listeners, at least to the remnant, might recall this. We talk about, you and I personally, we talk about this often, the Sid Goldberg rule, which is named after my father, who the very, very short version of this is, I didn't want to take a job offer to stick around working for somebody. And he was like, well, then ask for more money. And I was like, but you don't understand, Dad, I want to be free. I want to do these other things, and blah, 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 blah. And he says, well, then ask for a lot more money. And I was like, oh, you don't get me. This is when I was like 23 years old or whatever. And finally, my dad cut me off and said, look, Jonah. And my dad never cursed, but he says, so I'll clean it up for our listeners. He says, anything that doesn't violate your morals or your principles has a price. And I was like, Dad, you don't understand. And he said, look, I would happily, not reluctantly, happily eat dog feces for $1 billion. And so we use this all the time as this test, right? It's like there's a price for anything that doesn't violate the mission, doesn't violate the cause, or any of that kind of stuff. And so I'm just saying this to say that there is a tier of membership that will have Steve and I mowing your lawn every week. It's a big number. I want to be clear. It's a big, really, we have to fly out to.
You're going to get called on this. It's going to be great.
Make us an offer.
Look, if there's some super, super rich person out there who wants Jonah to come mow his lawn every week.
Yeah. It may not be. Look, it may not be every week. Yeah, but we will mow your lawn. We will certainly performatively mow your lawn. I want to be clear about this.